I'm attorney Phil Jusino, and this is Finding Common Ground here on Altice Channel 115. Got a great show planned for tonight. We're going to talk about the Kenosha shooter, Kyle Rittenhouse. We're going to talk about Nancy Pelosi getting her hair done. We're going to talk about Bernie Goetz. That was a famous shooting that happened 36 years ago. I remembered. For you young ones, I'm going to go into it, so I'm going to put it in context. A self-defense case, a shooting, racial implications. Also, I want to tell the audience that I will be going back on 103.9 FM LI News Radio starting Monday, September 14. I'm going to be doing the drive home show 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's one of Sean Hannity's hours that I will be taking over. So you tune in to 103.9 FM on Monday starting on September 14, 5 o'clock. Actually, I come on about 5:03. There's always commercials and news and weather, but 5:03, and I go to about 6 o'clock. So let's get to it. The other day, I'm watching the news, and I see a video of Nancy Pelosi. Now, this happened on Monday. The law in San Francisco allowed hair salons to do hair cutting and all of that outside, but the people had to wear a mask. And in the video, she's indoors clearly, walking from one room to another room, and she has no mask on. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this before we get into the Rittenhouse, Goetz, and self-defense, because it bothered me. When I see things like this, I think of the hypocrisy of the left. Now, look, there's hypocrisy on both sides, but doesn't it appear to be more on the left? Think about it. Whitmer, Michigan, a husband's able to go boating when no one else there is. De Blasio, he can do certain things that other New Yorkers can't. Cuomo, Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago, when she got a haircut in the throes of the pandemic, and she says, well, I'm a public figure and I needed a haircut, I go on TV. But the rest of us have to kowtow to them, and maybe we can't get a haircut, or we can't go to the doctor, or we can't do certain things, recreational things, that they are allowed to do. It's do as I say, not as I do. Do we have Diane Brandt on the line?
Just give me 1 second. I'll get her on right now.
We're going to get Diane on. Diane works in that industry. She works in a salon. And I wanted to get her perspective because those people, the people in the hair salon industry, barbers, gym owners, they were profoundly affected, more so, restaurants too, but more so than any other industry. Diane, do I have you on the line?
Yes, I'm here, Phil.
Hi, Diane, how are you? Now,
I'm good. How are you?
Now, when you saw that video, or still photo, whatever, of Nancy Pelosi in the salon, no mask, and the rules in San Francisco are outside, and you have to have a mask on, what did you think?
Well, she obviously is not practicing what she preaches. And my first thought was a woman of her age and some health problems she has. I'm surprised she was, so careless. In my salon, you cannot even enter without a mask. And if you do, you are escorted out the door.
Right.
So
I see. Now, you bring up an interesting point, because when I was looking at this, I was looking at the hypocrisy angle, of course. But you brought up something very important, because people we know, people of advanced age, 70s, 80s, people with other diabetes, heart disease, cancer. Now, she's a woman approaching 80, I believe, if not there yet, but certainly advanced age. She should want to protect herself. She's not some 20-year-old
100%.
that might get it and might not be affected in the same way. But what strikes me is when these people make these laws, so they made a law in New York now, for instance, that, Diane, you can't practice your profession. How long were you out of business for?
3 months.
3 months. So for 3 months, you couldn't earn any income.
Absolutely nothing.
Now, you have a chair in a salon, right? And other people work in that salon.
Yes.
And you have to follow the rules that they put forth.
Absolutely.
And, go ahead.
I gladly follow the rules. I mean, I don't want to, God forbid, get anyone sick. And I don't know where my clients have been, so they need to follow the rules so that I'm protected.
Right. Now talk me through it. Let's say, now do you do men and women's hair or just women?
Men and women.
Okay. So let's say I was going to come in to get a haircut with all my flowing locks, and I walked in. What would be the first thing I would encounter as I walk in? I have to have a mask on, right?
Absolutely.
So I walk in.
So the first thing you'd encounter would be someone is sitting at the desk, which is right by the door, and they hand you hand sanitizer, and you must use it right in front of them.
I see. And then?
After the hand sanitizer, you are walked to the chair that you will be sitting in, which, by the way, has been completely disinfected. After each and every client gets up, the chair is wiped down, disinfected completely.
Right.
Sit in the chair. A disposable cape is put on you, which gets thrown out as soon as you are done with that client. Chair gets disinfected. The next client cannot come in until you are completely done with all of those steps.
Got it. And the mask stays on the whole time, right? Doesn't come off?
The whole time.
Right.
Does not come off. When we're doing a man, and of course, you have to get around the ear.
Correct.
Which is difficult. We ask that they please hold it to their face so that we can take the little loop off their ear and get around the ear, and then it goes immediately back on. So it's never off the face.
Got it. And you're allowed to do indoors now. I know San Francisco has a different policy, but you can do indoors. But you take the necessary precautions. You clean the place when they're done. I know when I get my hair cut, once every 2 weeks I get a haircut, I keep the mask on. He works, as you said, he works around the ears. He's actually moving the band to get access to like my sideburns and then the back. We keep the mask on.
Right.
Those are the rules you
never
play
comes
by.
off.
Those are the rules you play by. And when you're somebody famous, like, let me ask you a question. Let's say Governor Cuomo called you and before you could open, and he said, look, can you sneak me in the back door? I need a haircut real bad. What would you tell him?
I would tell him no.
Right. Now, if it was me, you might do it, but I understand.
I have to be honest now. I will be honest with you. I had so many clients in those 3 months begging me to either come to their home, to promise me we can sit outside, to put color on their hair. We would wear masks, and I refused. And believe me, I was without income.
Sure.
But I did not do it.
Right. And
I
the thing,
did not do it.
the thing to me is, look, I know people got haircuts, people had their hair done. I understand that. What really bothers me, and the reason why I brought this up in the context of in the show, was because the hypocrisy of it, where somebody with power, clearly a governor, a congresswoman, a senator, somebody in power, and especially the ones that make the rules, de Blasio, they make these rules, and then you see Governor Cuomo and de Blasio walking around with no masks, yet you're crucified. You're told, we're going to close you down if you don't wear a mask, yet they get to do things that the rest of us can't do, so that's hypocrisy. And then how are we supposed to listen to them? And then when we see them do that, it's very easy to say, you know what, the heck with them. If they're going to do it, I'm going to do it. I need to do what I need to survive. I stayed open to a large extent during this pandemic. Now, I took precautions, as you know. If someone came into my office, they had to wear a mask. I cleaned the counters. There was social distancing. I wasn't shaking hands. Normally, someone comes in, I'm shaking hands. Wasn't doing that. You do what you have to do to take precautions. And like you do, you have the disposable, what do you call that? The bib or whatever.
The capes.
The capes.
Right, disposable capes. Not only that, we are on shifts because we cannot sit next to each other. So we have to be a chair apart to keep us 6. We don't want the clients sitting next to each other. We cannot work next to each other. Right. So we do take every precaution. Right. You know, it's hard to look at someone, in the limelight, especially now. They're scrutinized over everything that they do. every single thing. People are waiting for them to do something wrong, so you think that they
You would
would
think. Right.
be
And,
doing what they say.
right. And what's interesting here is the woman who released the tape was the salon owner. And she was upset because apparently she rents out chairs. And she was upset because she couldn't be open. In fact, I think Nancy Pelosi went in the day before the rule changed. But she violated them anyway because you had to have the mask on. Clearly, we don't see her with the mask on. And
Right.
it had to be done outside. That was the rule in San Francisco. So she violated both of those rules. And her spokesman said, well, she normally wears the mask. And come on, fess up. You screwed up and get off our backs.
Big time.
Practice what you preach.
I agree. And you have to set an example. And so
That's right.
you're saying that this is what you want everyone to do and how important it is, and you're preaching it. And then you turn around and you see something like this. What kind of example are you setting?
Right. And it happens.
So,
it happens way too often. I remember Trudeau in Canada. He came out and he said, you can't travel. You have to stay in for the holidays. It might have been Easter. Yet he and his family went to some location. They clearly violated the rules. Now, nothing's going to happen to him. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. But the rest of us
Right.
look at this, and you're right, they're being scrutinized. They're under the microscope, and rightfully so. Right? And just make rules, follow the rules, and the rest of us will be a lot happier. But Diane, I want to thank you for calling in. You take care of yourself.
you're welcome.
I hope business picks up now that you're able to practice your trade. And I wish you the
Yes,
best.
I do too. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Diane. You take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. 36 years ago, a man named Bernie Goetz, prior to that, nobody had heard of him. He had a degree, believe it or not, from NYU in electrical and I think it was electrical engineering. And he was a guy that, by all accounts, a very meek man. Stayed to himself, wasn't boisterous, low key, under the radar. Oh, nuclear energy. Electrical and nuclear energy was his degree. And he's riding on the subway December 22nd, 1984, a long time ago. And 4 young black men are on the train, the number 2 line in Manhattan. And they're standing around, and Darrell Cabey comes up to him and at first says, how you doing? And Bernie's getting a little nervous now because he sees he's sitting there by himself. Again, not a man that's used to flexing his muscles and being able to take care of himself. He's on a subway, so there's not a lot he can do. He can't just, where's he going to run to? Subway's moving. Cabey then says to him, give me some money. So clearly in his mind, this is a robbery. He's going to use force to take his money. He's asking him, I don't want to even say he asked him nicely. He said, give me your money. And the next step would be force. And that's what Bernie Goetz said he believed. So what does Bernie Goetz do? He pulls out his .38 caliber handgun and he shoots the 4 youths. Not Utes, the youths. He shoots them. And he shoots Darrell Cabey again, paralyzing him. None of them died, but they were injured. He gets off the train, and about a week later or so, he surrenders in New Hampshire. I think it was Concord, New Hampshire. They convene a grand jury. Now in New York, it's 16 to 23 people that hear evidence. And as an expression, you can indict a ham sandwich. Very easy to get an indictment. At that stage, it's not guilt or innocence. It's, is there probable cause to believe a crime was committed? So they present a number of charges to the first grand jury, including weapons possession, attempted murder. He's only indicted on 3 weapons charges because the gun he had was illegal. But he wasn't indicted on the other charges. In other words, attempted murder, assault. There's an outcry. And again, this was racially charged. 4 black men shot by a white man. Racially charged. They convene a second grand jury. The second grand jury returns 13 indictments, 13 counts, attempted murder, assault, and the weapons possessions. The case goes to trial. Now, Bernie Goetz's attorney argued self-defense. We're going to get to that in a little bit. It's a very, very fascinating area of the law. Fascinating. We all know conceptually self-defense means what you can do. You can use force to repel force. But it's more than that. So they go to trial, and a jury only convicts Bernie Goetz on 3 weapons charges because he had an illegal handgun. He had no defense for that. He shouldn't have had the handgun. But they didn't convict him of the attempted murder or the assault. There was a civil case. He was found liable. KB was awarded money, but that was on the civil side. Different burden of proof. In the criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt, he was only convicted of the weapons charges. The reason why I bring this case up, which again, a very, very famous case, very interesting, people my age and older that remember this case remember it very well. He became a cause celeb, Bernie Goetz. Became very famous. In fact, there were t-shirts, Bernie gets him. He was a hero to many people because he stood up. That was a time when people felt that they had no power. And in the city, through the years, even when Giuliani was there, he cleaned up the city. In large cities, people that ride the subway, the buses, they have a fear. And it's not always racially based. You know, you're taking a bus at midnight and you see a couple of people, young kids standing there, you might get a little nervous. Now, did he overreact? That was for a jury to decide. They said he didn't overreact. He was justified. Self-defense. Self-defense is an excuse to be able to use force, to repel force, could even be deadly force, which again, we'll get to in a little bit. Now, let's contrast the Bernie Goetz case that I just spoke about with Kyle Rittenhouse, which was the Kenosha shooting, which just happened the other day. Now, this young man, 17 years old, from Antioch, Illinois, got a call, or one of his friends got a call, that there was someone in distress whose store was either being looted or about to be looted, could be burnt to the ground. He needed help. The call went out. And Rittenhouse, who had been almost like a police cadet at some point and very into weapons and things like that, by all accounts, they went to his high school and asked people, or people that when he went to high school with, and asked them, and they said he was that kind of guy, easily angered. And again, that's what somebody is saying about him. But certainly a law and order, pro-police kind of young man. So he grabs his rifle and he goes to Kenosha. While he's there, right, shots ring out before he even fires his weapon. And he's near a gas station. We're going to show the video in a little while. And he's near a gas station, near a car, and it's dark out. Somebody with a shirt, I believe was around his head or around his neck, charges at him. You're going to see that in the video. And then they slow it down. I wish I was like John Madden. I had like the X's and the O's and I could show you exactly, but you're going to see the video slowed down and then we'll talk about it. He shoots that man. That man dies. Then he runs down the street. So almost in the middle of a street, people start coming up to him and attacking him. Someone hits him with a skateboard. Somebody kicks at him. He shoots one of the men, shoots him dead. Shoots another guy, almost blows his arm off. I saw a picture, and I think it's his bicep or whatever. A very bad injury. Not life, could have been life-threatening, he could have bled out, but he survived. So he killed 2 people, 1 person was shot. He's charged now with 5 felonies and a misdemeanor. Of course, murder, assault, and the like. One of the charges, it's interesting, that is, I say it's interesting because there was an article written about it, and his attorney spoke about this. The misdemeanor of a dangerous weapon by a person under the age of 18. He's 17. His attorney is going to argue that he didn't have the weapon illegally, and a well-regulated militiamen years and years and years ago, 1776 and prior, were under the age. Some were 16, some were 15. That's going to be a hard sell. But the big thing to save him is going to be the self-defense issue. I would like to run video 1 if we can. We have that? You let me know when the video stops.
now is the video.
And you let me know when that stops, Dan.
Right now we're taking a look at the slow motion action. This is actually not our video. This was a video on YouTube.
And then it'll slow down.
Now they're showing from a larger angle where the first shot could have possibly come from in real time, slowing it down a little bit. So that was the first clip.
You saw that. Okay, let's go. So he shoots that man, the man with the shirtless man, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then he starts to run. I think he calls the police at that time, correct?
I don't know if it was the police or somebody from the militia group that he was with, but it was. I believe I've read something in the report that said a detective did say he called
Call the
somebody.
police. I
Yes.
heard he did. Okay. So now he runs down the street with his rifle, and you see somebody come up to him, try to hit him. And then the two people that he ultimately shot, one had a skateboard, one kicked at him. Let's show that video, Dan.
Kyle's running away from the scene. He's just called the authorities or whoever that was on the phone. This is video is a bit graphic, so the bottom screen is the image of the shot at the gas station at first. Kyle is being chased down the road. Where they actually, he shoots the first man dead. The man comes with the skateboard. The other man he shoots in the arm that we all saw all over social media. So that was the second video. That was leading the scene. Right now you're going to see some gunshots fired off. That's not coming from Kyle's gun. That's what is being believed. Now, in this shot here, the person filming this is filming the police rolling down the street. In confusion, they didn't know who the shooter was. They didn't know who Kyle was. So right here now, we're looking at the police in the picture that's going all over social media with Kyle walking up to them.
With his hands up.
This is where right now he's jogging to them with his rifle still attached to him, hands up, and the police with all the confusion.
Waving by.
One thing that I do want to mention, the police over the loudspeaker was, I don't know if it was the front vehicle, but one of the police vehicles in that caravan over the loudspeaker said injured person directly ahead, injured person directly ahead. So it's possible that their initial response was to just respond to the person who's injured
Right,
at the
but
gas station.
but Dan, but they clearly could see he had a weapon.
Oh yeah, yeah, and also there's people who are right now. People are saying this is the man who shot the people that you're responding to, and all this, and how talking to that person off screen.
Okay, so we can take the video down.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting, and I think this is worth noting, is that the only weapons charge, I believe, 5 felonies, murder, and so on, and then the weapons charge was not that he had a weapon illegally, but for the fact that he was under 18. So if he was 19, he was allowed to have that weapon where he did. Now, this is not a handgun. That's a different...
That's a military-grade weapon. I believe it was like an AR-15
right,
style.
but they didn't charge him. They charged him because of his age. Right? Now, if he had a handgun illegally, like Bernie Getz, we talked about Bernie Getz, that he had that gun illegally. However he got it, he had it illegally. Now, I used the example one time. I could be sitting there with a bazooka, and if someone comes up to me and tries to harm me, and I shoot him with that bazooka, I can be charged with an illegal bazooka. But I still can use the justification of self-defense.
I have a question. If this is going to come into play, I've heard some people say, like, if you're going to go to a riot, go big or go home. And they're speaking about the size of your rifle. If you're going to go into a riot that's, very tense, you're not really going to want to go with a handgun. But what does that really say about the intent? But is that going to come into play? Like, let's say a handgun is concealable. You know what I mean? If you're walking around with a big gun, everyone around you knows you're holding a weapon. But will that come into play? Are they gonna? Is that something that might? If Kyle had a handgun,
it could. Now remember, he was there. Let's talk about why he showed up. He got a call. He grabs his weapon and he shows up. He knows he's going into a war zone. Now I'm going to call it a war zone because it was pretty darn close. There were other shots were fired. Things were being burned. This was not a rumble, so to speak, where you say, oh, there's a bunch of guys hanging out at the ball field, that we're going to meet them in the Outsiders or something like that, where there was a rumble. This was, and not to disrespect a soldier, because a war zone is a war zone, let's be honest. But when I call it a war zone, I mean that people had weapons, there were shots fired. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but in Kyle's mind, and when I get to the elements of self-defense, you'll see what I mean. It's important to know, in a sense, what was in his mind. Now let's go over the 4 elements of self-defense. Now what is self-defense? It's justification for using force, including deadly force, against another human being, or more than one. You could be against 3 or 4 people, which could exonerate you, which could cause you to be found not guilty if you were charged with a serious crime. It could be assault, it could be murder, it could be attempted murder. Right? So in the vernacular, it's an excuse for using violent force. Now, there are basically 4 elements. Right? The 4 elements are: you're confronted with an unprovoked attack. It has to be unprovoked. You cannot, with few exceptions, and we'll get to one of them, you can't start the fight and then the guy hits you back and you pull out a gun and shoot him. You were the instigator. You started that. So you wouldn't be able to use that as a valid defense. The second is the threat of injury or death. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm sitting at Taco Bell, minding my own business, and someone walks in and says, "Phil, you are the blankety blank blank blank." I can't pull out my weapon and shoot him. No. Now, if he comes up to me and let's say he pushes my shoulder, I can't take out my weapon and shoot him. That would be unreasonable, an unreasonable use of force. I'm sitting at Taco Bell minding my business, someone comes in with a gun, points it at me, I pull out my weapon and shoot him, I am certainly justified. But it has to be a threat of injury or death. It can't be, he hurt my feelings. It has to be imminent, the third element. It has to be imminent threat. It can't be, next week I'm going to kick your butt. No, that doesn't give you the right to use force. Now the force could be your fist, the force could be a bat, it could be a knife, it could be a bottle, a number of things. Force. So a degree of force is objectively reasonable under the circumstances. It doesn't have to be equal. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm minding my own business, someone comes at me with a knife, and all I have is a gun, I pull the gun out and shoot him. That's justifiable, because he was going to harm me or kill me. I didn't have to look for a knife to make it equal. No. That's what I had on me. Right? Contrast that with someone a woman who's 5 feet tall comes up and slaps me. I can't use force against her. I might be able to subdue her if I think she's going to continue to hit me, but she slaps me. I can't just hold off and punch her. That would be unreasonable force. And the person who's going to allege self-defense has to objectively have an objective, reasonable fear of bodily, physical injury or death. And it's objective. It's not subjective. Someone's a paranoid, schizophrenic, or delusional. Oh, everyone's out to get me. No. It has to be objective. Look what a reasonable person would say under similar circumstances. Now, what is the burden of proof? Very important, and that's overlooked often. Burden of proof. Now, we know in a criminal case for a conviction, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt, not a preponderance of the evidence like in a civil case. Beyond a reasonable doubt has to be a higher standard. It can't be, he probably did it. No. But what is the burden for self-defense? Preponderance of the evidence. What does that mean? The proponent of that self-defense argument has to prove his case. 50.00001 would be enough. Anything greater than 50%, if the jury accepts that, it's up to the jury, unless you have a bench trial. So those are the elements. That's the burden of proof. Now, let's give some examples. So an individual can use deadly force when the defendant initiates an attack using non-deadly force. So the force, again, doesn't have to be so much proportional. If you're coming at me with a knife where you could stab me, I can use that deadly force. But it can get fuzzy, because is it just a fight? Is it something where the person would just hit me and walk away and then I turn around and I shoot him in the back? No. So there's not always a clear-cut answer. You have to look at the elements, but it's not always clear-cut. And there's room for the prosecutor and the defense attorney to spin it their way. Now, there's an exception in New York and other states called the withdrawal exception. So the defendant can initiate, let's say the defendant initiates the contact. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I go up to somebody and I punch them and I start beating them up. And then I say, wait a minute, this is wrong. I'm out of here. And I turn around and I start to walk away. And the person that I was beating, the combatant, if you want to call him that, takes out a gun and shoots me. They could say, well, the defendant now can't assert self-defense because he initiated the contact. The exception here says he clearly established that he was breaking off the attack, all right? And he withdrew from that altercation. You can't be saying, punching a guy saying, I'm done, I'm done. No, no, no. But if you make it clear, I'm done, I'm out of here, and you break away from that combat, that person, the other person, can't pull out a gun and shoot you. Now, that having been set forth, let's go to Rittenhouse again, Kyle Rittenhouse. Does he have a valid self-defense claim? I'm going to give you my opinion in a second. Dan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Do you think that Kyle Rittenhouse has a valid self-defense claim?
I think he absolutely does. From what I've seen in the video, it's as long as that first shot wasn't from him, it was within very close proximity to where he was standing. You guys, the viewers, you saw it in the video. He was being chased by, I believe on video, it looked like two individuals. The one person that he shot. But with all of that, I think that he does have a good chance of, self-defense if that first shot was not him.
Okay.
In the video, when it was slowed down, it does appear that there was a gunshot. And you do see him move his head. But if that first shot was not him, I think that there's a great chance that he's...
Okay. Now, I don't disagree with you, but I'm going to give you my analysis. I kind of disagree in one respect. I agree overall that he does have a valid defense. The fact that there was another shot prior to him shooting, yes, that makes his case stronger.
You would think it would certainly increase the odds, right?
Right. But let's assume that shot never happened for a second, Dan. Let's just assume that he's there, the place is burning, it's chaotic, it's dark out, people are running all over the place, yelling, and then somebody out of the corner of his eye charges him. And he has that weapon, and he pulls that trigger. Right? Now, it would have been a stronger case. It makes it a stronger case that there were other shots potentially fired. Yes, I agree with that. It would have been a stronger case if that shirtless man was holding a knife or a gun. But it doesn't appear that he was. So Rittenhouse has to say objectively, let's look at the other elements. Did he provoke that potential altercation? No. In that particular instance, Kyle did not.
So are you saying the gunshot is essentially removed from that initial encounter that he had with the man that he shot?
Well, when you say the first, Kyle apparently heard other shots going on, right?
Well, that was later on. The initial shot, right before he fired 4 shots into that man, just before that, literally seconds before, a single shot rang out.
Right. But I'm saying even without that, that makes his case stronger because then, oh my God, who has a gun? Who's shooting? There's a man approaching me. And it happens so quickly where you can't, if you had a photo of the guy, you say, okay, left hand, nothing in there. Right hand, nothing in there. I don't see a gun. I don't see a bat. It doesn't happen that way. It's boom, that guy was on him very quickly. So assuming that either Kyle didn't hear a shot or there was no shot, he still has a self-defense claim. He has to say it was unprovoked. Was it? He wasn't approaching the man. So yes, he has it for the first element. The second one, did he have a threat of injury or death? I think he can make that case. If someone's approaching you, charging you, what do you think he's going to do? Come up to you and give you a candy bar? No, he would knock you down, potentially beat you up. So I think he can sustain the second element. What's the third one? Degree of force objectively reasonable under the circumstances. Gets a little tougher here, but still he has it. That's what he had on him. He had a rifle. So he could make the argument, what was I supposed to do? And he's a 17-year-old guy, not a very big guy. What was he supposed to do? Put down the rifle and hope he can beat the guy up? So I still think he has 3. 4, objectively reasonable fear that he would be injured or killed. And I think he had that. Because why in darkness on a street where there might have been shots fired, there's certainly fires going on, people are nuts. Should he have let that guy attack him? I certainly wouldn't have.
So now I have a question that goes back to the initial shooting at the one at the gas station that leads up to the ones.
Okay.
Let's say the DA finds him not guilty of that shooting at the gas station. What happens to the shootings thereafter? Would they charge him separately, or would they charge it together? Because if they release him off the first charge, the other shootings only happen because of the first one. So
right.
Is there?
So let me just say this: the DA wouldn't find him not guilty. What would happen is the police have to determine, and they have because they charged him, that there was reasonable cause to believe, probable cause to believe that a crime was committed. The 5 felonies and the misdemeanor. So the DA then now, Danny, has to present that to the grand jury. The grand jury hears the evidence, will see the video, will hear testimony, and return a true bill for all 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, none. All right? So to answer your question, and I did it in a little bit of a roundabout way because I wanted to make it clear the procedure. Let's say the grand jury says that first shooting was not justified. They could indict him on a count of murder for that first guy, Dan, at the gas station. Then he runs down the street and a guy hits him with a skateboard, another guy tries to kick him. The grand jury could say that was justified. So it's not all or nothing.
Okay, I see.
That's why, remember with Bernie Goetz we talked about, and that's why I wanted to talk about that, because that was a great lead-in, I think, if I say so myself, because they presented a case to the second grand jury for political reasons. And that grand jury said, yes, he had an illegal gun, we have to indict him for that. But we believe there was self-defense, and we buy it. So therefore, they didn't indict him. The first time. The second grand jury did. And then the ultimate jury.
You're referring to the Bernie Goetz case.
Bernie Goetz, right. The first jury said no. The second one, politically charged, yes. And then the ultimate jury said, hey, we can't clear him on a illegal weapons charge because he didn't have a license for that gun. But it was self-defense. So Rittenhouse can be indicted. Now, don't forget, it's not guilty yet. It's indicted. Then whatever he's indicted on, Danny, would then go to trial, assuming no plea bargain. So
where is he right now? He's
in jail, unless they bonded him out. In New York, he'd be out. No, but where he is, I'm sure he's being held either no bail or very, very high bail. So now his attorney has to formulate a defense. There's a lot of video footage now. So that's going to come into play. Right? Now, just one last thing before we call Ed Vilbig, Ed from Atlanta. In the Bernie Goetz case, that was racially charged because, again, a white man shooting 4 black young men. Then you had the OJ case some years later. And again, racially charged. LA was burning. The sad thing is, it just seems like this country can't get past these racial issues. Now, I'm not saying it's systemic. All I'm saying is sometimes things happen that are tragic, like when Floyd was killed by that cop. Again, to me, it looked like murder, but again, I'm not the jury, I'm not a grand jury. It looked like murder to me. The other case that happened at Wendy's in Atlanta, that didn't look like murder to me. So are we going to, in 20 years from now, have another incident, or 10 years from now, or 5 years, have another incident and still go back to that racial divide? Because not everything is racially charged. Look at Rittenhouse, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but those 3 people that were killed were white, correct?
I believe all 3 that were shot
right,
were white.
Because that's what it looked like to me, and there was no reporting that he shot a black man. Now, if he shot a black man, I'm sure BLM would have burned that place down even more than they already did, and I saw photographs of that and video. Horrible. You have Portland, like 100 days of rioting. You have all these places. What good does it serve? Yes, you're legally allowed to protest, but when you burn down buildings and you burn down a precinct, or you take over a precinct, or you try to put something in the door so that the cops can't get out, and you try to burn down a precinct, that's attempted murder. And it doesn't serve any purpose. It didn't serve any purpose when they burned down LA after Rodney King was cleared initially before it went to the feds. And I remember a man coming out of one of the stores that was destroyed, and he was crying, and most of the crowd was black and Hispanic, and he was crying. He said, "Why did you do this to my store?" He must have been 50, 60 years old. "Why did you do this to my store? What did I do to you?" He didn't cause a racial divide. He didn't do anything to anyone. He was an honest man that had a store, and now he didn't anymore. And that's what's happening. What's that?
I wonder if he recognized any of the individuals that were robbing a shop.
I don't know. But I doubt the people that did it would probably stick around if there was video there.
No, the reason why I'm saying that is because a lot of people are saying that Kyle Rittenhouse was essentially fighting a battle that wasn't his by going to another state and trying to...
Okay, and that argument can be made. But what I'm saying is this. There was that police officer, the black police officer, whose wife spoke at the Republican National Convention, where he was helping out a friend. He was an off-duty cop, might have been retired. He was helping out a friend. It wasn't his store. It wasn't his fight. But you're allowed to enter the fray to help other people. You're allowed to do that. I have a weapon. I'm not legally allowed to carry it, but I'm allowed to possess it in the home, go to the range. If, let's say, my neighbor was being attacked, now maybe I'm a little on shaky ground because I'm no longer in my house. But if I saw my neighbor being attacked by a mob, I would have to spring into action to protect him. It's not my fight. I could stay in my house, but I could choose to do that. So, again, to recap, that Rittenhouse case is eventually going to go to the jury, and we're going to see what happens. I doubt it'll be a plea bargain. I doubt it. We'll have to see. And again, a tragedy. Those 2 people that died, they should have maybe minded their own business. Maybe if everybody stayed out of Kenosha that night, I wouldn't have a show about Kenosha. All right, so let's wrap it up. Let's get Ed from Atlanta on the phone. I'm sure he has a lot to say.
Well, good evening. Hello.
Ed.
Hello from Atlanta.
Ed, how are you doing?
Good, good. I'm driving on my way home from work.
Okay. And now, have you been following that Kenosha shooting?
Yes. It just doesn't make sense to me. I wish people would just come out and say that they're against violence. Black Lives Matter, Antifa. I understand people have a cause. We all have, a passion for things. But you can't justify it by violence. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't.
And
It
you know,
doesn't help the cause.
if you have Black Lives Matter and you're going to say that it's okay to commit violence, when it goes the other way, then I don't want to hear anything. So the whole thing is just makes my insides sick, because
Mine
this
too.
is not what America's all about.
Right. Well, I recently, I think I might have told you about this, Ed. I spoke to a relative, won't give the name, and he's not for violence, but he made a comment to me that they feel that they need to raise the level of the protest, meaning maybe burn something down or break something, loot, maybe not looting, but to do something to get the attention of other people. The problem with that is they've done it for years. Remember going back to the 50s and 60s, there were riots, race riots. Now, Martin Luther King didn't riot, it was protest, it was march. He didn't use violence. Even Malcolm X, maybe the threat of violence, but didn't use violence. Look what happened when they burned down. Remember after Rodney King, Ed? You remember that, okay? And
Yes.
they burned down a good portion of LA, and there's riots in Portland, and it's not helping. It's not like we're going to wake up one day and say, you know what, all those riots, now nobody's prejudiced, and all the cops are going to treat all the black defendants fairly, and that's not going to help the situation. Do you think it does?
No, not at all. And rioting, looting, all it is doing, we spoke about this on this show a few weeks ago. I didn't think Trump had a chance. And now I think there's a good possibility he's going to win, because COVID has been pushed aside. There have been mistakes with COVID. We all know that. But this law and order is the big issue. And to come out and say that, I saw what happened in D.C. the other night, where they were telling people to get out of your house.
Yes.
And shining a light into your house. I think BLM, Antifa, they are basically pushing the independents and a lot of middle-class America to the Republicans. I don't think this is really smart on their part. But this needs to, now we're seeing what BLM is really about. Now we're seeing what Antifa is really about. It has nothing to do with a cause. It's just about destruction and violence, beating up police officers. I saw a video where a police officer was hit in the back of the head with a metal object.
I
the officer going down, and people, people are cheering about that. This is. I saw that, and I'm like, it was. I couldn't. Just had a chill up my spine that people would laugh about it. It makes no sense to me. I think people need to examine themselves. What do you want in our new president? Do you want someone that's going to allow violence to continue? So then we'll just have, everyone will have a gun and just shoot each other? Or do you want to have a president that's for the police, that's for law and order? Do you need some police reform? Yes. But to defund the police?
Right. And
New York
the thing
City's
too,
a mess. I couldn't believe it when I was
I
up
know.
there.
Now, we heard a while back Biden was asked a question. I think it was a handicapped man who asked a question. I think the voice, it was like an artificial voice of some kind. And he said, will you defund the police? And his answer was chilling. He said yes. Now, then later he said, I didn't mean defund it, I mean to remove resources. When you take money away from the police, in a sense, you're defunding the police. Maybe not fully defunding, but let's not split hairs. Do you think they need less people on the streets of places like Portland, Chicago, Detroit, New York, or more police? If you're an honest person, Ed, living in one of those inner cities, do you want more police or less police?
More police, of course. And you see what's going on. All these cities are controlled by who? Republicans or Democrats?
Yep.
So all my liberal friends that are listening, I don't want you to threaten me with violence or threaten other people with violence. Let's have critical conversations. How are you going to solve the problems in the inner cities? Stop blaming Trump. That's all I ever hear. One of my friends suggested that he would love for Trump to be shot. That's how a liberal responds to a debate? Shoot the president? Could you imagine if I would have said shoot Barack Obama? What would have happened?
Right. And you wouldn't do that because you're a good person. And look, any reasonable person would not call for violence against the president, against anybody. Look what they did. Ed, you talked about Washington, D.C. Remember after the RNC, the convention, Rand Paul, what he had to experience? They were yelling at his wife, calling her all kinds of names, saying what they wanted to do to her. And not just him, other people that were leaving that convention. That was horrible. Those people should have been arrested many of them should have been arrested on the spot.
the problem is you have prosecutors, you're an attorney, you know what's going on. They're letting people, they're arresting people 2-3 times and letting them out, give them a slap on the wrist. They come back out and they protest and they do violence and they hurt others again. So that's what I don't understand either. Where are the prosecutors? They're allowing this to go on. The situation's getting worse. But as I said again, I didn't think Trump had a chance a few weeks ago. Now, it's a totally different game. And I would not be surprised if Trump takes New York or California. These states
I don't know about
so
California.
devastated.
Maybe New York, but right. But
so many people are leaving New York. I mean, I watch the New York news, and it's troubling that you have blocks and blocks. And the thing is, when I was up there a few weeks ago, I saw it firsthand. The media is not playing, they're not really showing the accurate picture. It's miles of Manhattan stores that are boarded
Absolutely.
up, not just a few blocks. Now, what's going to happen in 2021? There's no tax revenue going to come into New York City, New York State. So what is de Blasio, the mayor, the great mayor of New York, what is he going to do? Ask the federal government for, instead of $7 billion, now we want $9 billion, now we want $11 billion? How about being
he exits the stage, Ed, in 2021. He probably doesn't care. He won't be there.
But I just can't believe how bad the conditions are in New York, and nobody seems to do anything about it. How come they're not impeaching de Blasio in Como with the nursing home scandal, where he just sent COVID patients there to die?
Right.
Where's the outrage? A lot of stuff that happens in New York, because New Yorkers don't take an initiative, that's what you get. De Blasio has really made New York a mess.
Right.
And
He has.
I don't see the outrage.
Right.
I'm outraged and I don't even live there.
Now, one thing that de Blasio early on, way before COVID, made a mistake is, remember he said, we're not going to go after minor crimes and people that jump the turnstile. You can't do that because you send a message that you can commit crimes and get away with it. Giuliani had you break a window, we arrest you. You send a message. You said something, Ed, that a lot of people don't even consider. You said about prosecutors. I'm glad you said that. I'm a former prosecutor. And I forget where it was. It might have even been Portland. 600 cases were dropped of people that were rioting. What kind of message are you sending if people get arrested for rioting? These are not protesters now. They crossed the line. And you say, we're not going to prosecute you. What do you think the people that are left over there, and even those people too, say, you know what, we can get away with this. Let's do it again. That's the problem.
Well, you said it. The issue is, if you do the same thing and then nothing happens, you're going to do it again and again and again. Right. And I don't understand, if you beat a police officer, you need to be locked up for good.
They got to throw the book at you.
It doesn't make sense. And then they want to blame Trump. You're the mayor of Portland, for example, or Seattle, or one of these cities. You want to blame Trump for the issues that you created. De Blasio the crime rate has spiked because of his ineffective management, not Donald Trump, not Como.
We got to wrap these up soon, but one thing, I don't know if you heard this today. The mayor of Portland, he lives in an apartment complex, he has to move because mobs have been damaging that property. They know where he lives. Now, think about this for a second, the logic or the lack thereof behind it. He is on the side of the liberal progressives. They are damaging his property. Remember that other mayor was a young guy, it wasn't Portland, where they said defund the police and he said no, and they basically told him, get the heck out of here, remember? And he had to walk with his tail between his legs, and he's on their side. So if you're not 100% to defund the police, so you could say, I want to defund them 50%. Guess what? You're going to get an earful because you're not enough on their side. Now listen, Ed, we got to wrap things up, but listen, next week, we got another great show planned. I'm going back on 103. That's the station that made you famous. You became Ed from Atlanta on 103.9 FM, LI News Radio. I'm going back on, and I expect you to call in.
I can't wait.
And I'm looking forward to that. Listen.
Of course.
All right, Ed, so I'm going to say goodbye because I got a few closing words. You have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Got to wrap this up. We're running out of time. I wrote a book called Divorce, A Practical Guide. It's a great read. You're considering a divorce. In fact, I gave somebody a book today. That was their homework. Take a look at it. It's chock full of information. You can go to my sources of information. I have vlogs, I have narrative things to help you out, to learn, to become a better consumer when you go see an attorney. Very, very important. If you're going to buy a TV, you're going to Google a few things ahead of time to know what you want to get. When you go to see an attorney, it's best the more information you have, the better he or she can help you out. You have a great week, and on September 14th, for you locals, I expect you to turn on 103.9 FM at about 5:03, and you can hear my radio show. You have a great day. Thank you.